Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and today is August 6th, and you'll probably be seeing this on the 7th. But it occurred to me that I think on August 4th or 5th, maybe in the late evening of August 4th into the morning of August 5th, I believe that's when Marilyn Monroe passed away. And I think today or tomorrow or the day you see this might actually be the funeral day, the day when she was laid to rest. So I thought it might be a nice day to do a little video on Marilyn. I know she's been, even in death, she's been commented on to death. So in a way, I resist it a little bit, but I've never asked the universe. I've never put it out there. What happened to Marilyn? I've read several books regarding her life, and some of them, they all conclude with their theory of what happened to cause her death. But it's still unknown. Now, if it's been unknown for the past 60 years, or 62 years, whatever it is, it's probably going to be, the universe isn't going to tell me anything new. I don't think so, because I think what's to be known about it is out there already. But it doesn't hurt to ask. Look, this thing is driving me crazy. I have this hanger thing. I should have cut it off. I'm going to cut it off right now. Now, which deck am I going to use? I figured I'd like to use the prettiest, not necessarily the most feminine, but for one of the reads, I'd really like to use a feminine deck for her because she was so pretty and feminine. So you guessed it, the Fortuna. I just pulled it out for yesterday's read, and I think it would be appropriate. Maybe that's even why I thought of doing a reading on her today. But the other deck, which I think is just as handsome as it is beautiful, is of course the Matronua by Valentina de Luca, which is a very recent publication. So I think I'll do a read on the lovely Marilyn using both of these decks. And it's funny because my name is Marilyn, and I never really think of my sharing a name with her. Isn't that funny? I never really, I mean, obviously I'm dark. I have dark eyes. I have dark hair. When I was younger, I was pretty. I'll say I was pretty. I was a pretty girl. But not to that level, just not as pretty as Marilyn Monroe. And well, my name, for those of you who are here as descendants, my mother, her mother was, she was born in this country, but I think was the only sibling in her bunch of 15 kids that was born here. The rest of them were born in Italy and came over, and then she was born here. And her mother, and so my mother's mother, the first generation that was born here from her family, the first person born here from her family, was into Hollywood, and imagine in the teens, the silent era, and the early 20s, in the 30s, they were totally into the movies because that was their escape, and you could go spend the whole day in the theater for a nickel or whatever it cost, so movies was a big part of their lives, and it was a big part of how a lot of these immigrants learned to speak English, And my mother's side were motivated to be American, They pretty much dropped all their Italian customs. The only thing they would do on occasion was talk Italian so that my mother's generation of kids couldn't understand what they were saying. But they spoke English in the house, because the kids really didn't speak Italian. My mother and her siblings really didn't speak Italian. And so anyway, they were really, really into the movies. And so my grandmother named her kids after she got the one named after the husband and the one named after, herself. She named them after Hollywood movie stars. So my eldest aunt was Evelyn. Who do we know from the silent era? Evelyn Nesbit, right? Then my mother, who was the baby, then there came the second. Now, I think it just happened to coincidentally jibe that her husband's name, my grandfather's name, was Guido, but they Americanized their names, Okay, so he became William. And I think it's no coincidence that William Powell, who was like a big box office hit, his name was William too. So I think it was easy for my grandmother to name her son William. Then came Elizabeth, which was my grandmother's name. So she named her second daughter Elizabeth, but it may or may not have been in reference to any other starlet whose name might have been Elizabeth. And then my mother. Now my mother was named, she was born in the house, so there was no proper birth certificate. She was just born in the house, and all they had for her on record was a baptismal record. But she was baptized Constance Bernadette. And at some point, and probably after Constance Bennett. My guess is that the Constance came from Bennett. But at some point, Marilyn Miller became a big stage, well, she was like a fan dancer, but she was really famous, so maybe my grandmother liked the name. So then she went and just changed my mother's name. There was no legal documentation that had my mother's name. So she went from Constance Bernadette on her baptismal record to just becoming Marilyn. And so in those days, you know, my mother just went, you know, I don't know how she got a driver's license or anything without paperwork, but those days, I guess it was no trouble. So she, in her adult life, in her school years, was just Marilyn. And it wasn't until the 70s, when I was 17, my parents wanted to go to Italy. They wanted to do a trip to Italy. And there were no birth certificates for my mother. And to get a passport, they were like, well, you have to have documentation. Well, she was born at home. There was no record, so it was a mess. So that's how she found out that her birth name that she was given was Constance Bernadette. But she was known her whole life as Marilyn. But at any rate, so I was named after my mother. And I was born in 58. And it was right around the time when Marilyn Monroe became very popular. So I don't know if Marilyn became a popular name in the late 50s, early 60s because of Marilyn Monroe, but I wasn't named after Marilyn Monroe. I was named after my mother, who was named after a fan dancer. So that's the story there. Okay, so I talked too much. So I'm going to do the Fortuna first, and then I'm going to do I'm going to save the best for last. So I'm going to do the second reading with the Matronua after. But like I did yesterday when I did what was so-and-so's influence, or I did a read yesterday on the unfortunate circumstance regarding Amy Bradley's disappearance or death. And I did two reads. I did one, the person who people suspected had something to do with her death and what his influence was on her, and then the other read, the second read, was what really did happen to her after, what was her part in it, Anyway, I'm going to do the same kind of strategy here. So on this, I'm going to do a read on the politics. There's a lot of people who believe there was political motivation to end her. And I don't know. I'm just going to take a look at that aspect, and then we're going to do another read on what really happened. It's also occurred to me to use the more masculine version of the deck because the people in question were men. So I wonder if that would be a better one. So I am going to use a simple coin that I just happen to have on my table. Heads and tails, right? Heads, we use this one. Heads is this one, heads is this one, tails is that one. How's that? Okay, shaking it up, throwing it up in the air. Tails. So this was heads, and this one is tails, right? I think that's what I said. Well, that's what we're doing. Okay. So let me mix them up, put the question to the cards. I'll be right back. Alrighty, so the way I put it to the universe is, what was the influence, or what was the participation level of the political men who have been suspected of having a hand in her passing? This is a large deck, so it's hard for me to riffle shuffle. What I have to do is break it into smaller chunks and riffle shuffle it in sections. Okay, and this is the Emerald Anima of Fortuna. Okay, so we have 2 coins. I'm going to put them up right. So that's not much to go on. 2 suggests the bond of well-being. Could be, I don't want to say transactional, but there was something in it for both of them. Now this would be the equivalent of swords. So this would be the Knight of Swords. He was a young man, although he was an adult. But he carried on like a young man, didn't he? And his brothers too. Then we have 10. So it went from 2 to 10. It escalated. So something about their relationship escalated, which is kind of interesting. She did do that Happy Birthday, Mr. President. Wasn't she dead a few months later? And, in retrospect, when we watch that video of her singing Happy Birthday, Mr. President, and Jackie Kennedy refused to go to that thing because I guess she knew that it was going to happen, and she didn't want to condone that. So this is interesting how their partnership or their thing escalated, oversaturated. What maybe was a fun thing at first became overindulged. This is her, okay, the Princess of Keys. So we have the prince and the princess. Front and center of the core 9, we have another 2 of swords. Now 2, earth and air. They don't get along so good. There's conflict, there's contrast. Conflict. Queen of Keys. Wow. Now who could this be? This could be an aspect of Marilyn herself, right? The gate is closed. It comes under the 10, right? So like the door has slammed shut on this little fun thing they had going on. It's interesting. Lots of keys. Now here we have some fire, 3. Let's see what the next cards are. The good times, right? That looks like, just like, the 2 of coins, how it starts out good. There's like good times. It's fun. It's sexy. It's hot. And then we have a dampen. Now this could be, Mrs. Kennedy could have an aspect of this too. I don't think she was in any way involved in the demise of Miss Monroe, but, part of the cooling off process, if we look at, this being a damper on the fire, right? Because this is water and fire here. She was the queen, Mrs. Kennedy would be the queen, and she didn't, like I mentioned, she didn't attend. So she could have said, putting an end to that, because that was disgraceful. I could see a wife saying that. And then we have the Ace of Coins, which is very interesting. So we go from a 2 to a low number to a high number of escalation, and we have the door slamming shut on what might have been fun, a fun, union. And perhaps this is, the Mrs. Kennedy putting an end to this sexy time, right? And a new chapter, starting a new chapter, which didn't include Miss Monroe. But I don't see, we'll do the quint cards, but I don't see that they were instrumental or anyone. There's nothing here that suggests they put an end to Miss Monroe's life. It's just that the social aspects of it had to be toned down, and they did. Now, after she passed away, there was probably a whole lot that they wanted to control. So I'm not saying they didn't have anything to do with that aspect. We'll see what the quint cards are. But as far as their culpability, it was just the, two adults playing a dangerous game. Let me do the adding up and we'll see what we get. Okay, well, these quint cards are kind of interesting. The final outcome, or the not the outcome, but the final quint card for the read is the moon. And it lines up, by design, with this row here where we have the female Pope. Well, let's look at the whole thing. So when I cut to the chase, then I just look at the quint cards first. I see that this arrangement that they had would have consequences. We have the hanged man here, right? I interpret the hanged man as consequences or punishment or something like that. So the good time that escalated, right, got out of control because we go from 2 to 10, which is an oversaturation point, came with consequences. Then we have a door being slammed on the Princess of Keys in particular. Maybe she wanted it to continue, but the door slammed on her. And then we have a very moody Marilyn, right? We had a woman that became maybe sad, introspective, and maybe moody. So it affected her. His influence on her, his input in her life, that contributed to her demise, maybe had to do with her emotional well-being. Because her emotional well-being before was fun, right? We had cards of emotional well-being. But it escalated to a point where the door got slammed on her, and then it became, he was able to shut the door, right? He was preserving his image, right? That this, ultimately, he had to preserve his image. So he was thinking about himself. He put himself first. And maybe, like I described, that his wife maybe said, you have to end this, you have to put yourself first. So I think the extent of it while she was alive was just that it put her in a spiral. The way she responded to that relationship, just like yesterday. Isn't that funny? Just like yesterday's read. The person everybody thought was responsible for the passing, or not even the passing. A lot of people just think he was responsible for selling that one young lady to trafficking, right? His influence on her may not have been great. I mean, he, not that he did anything or, deliberately led to her demise, but, maybe he said something to her that was, affected her deeply. Maybe the gentleman gave her something, that in addition to alcohol caused her not to think clearly, or maybe he just kept pumping her with alcohol. I don't know. But seems like it was the same kind of thing here. Just that the dynamic between the two of them, he served his purpose, but when he was done with her, it was done. And it affected her more greatly than it affected him. Or the relationship meant more to her. Or it damaged her more to end the relationship than it did him, because he did it for self-preservation, for his image. Which is very interesting read, don't you think? Okay, now I hate to use the beautiful Matranoia to, get insight into what happened to the beautiful Marilyn Monroe. But, hey, I got to break it in at some point for maybe not a wonderful situation, right? It's a beautiful deck. It'll read. So I'm going to use this to see what, on the evening of August 4th going into August 5th, what really happened to the beautiful Miss Marilyn Monroe. Okay, I see I got this in order. So I'm going to take out the cards that are duplicates. I'll use the ones that I prefer to use. And I'll have to shuffle this really, really well because it's in order. So it'll take me a bit. I'll be right back. Okay, so the way I put it to the universe is, what were the events of August 4th into August 5th? Or what was it that led to the end of Miss Monroe? What was the cause of death? Okay? What was the cause? Wow. First card out is the Emperor. So he had an impact on her for sure. My goodness. That was the last card in his spread. That was, not the final quint card, but it's interesting that it came into this. This was also in the other spread. This is a different deck, so it's not because I didn't shuffle that deck well, right? It had nothing to do with this. So the Emperor beginning a new life for himself. Let's see what the next card is. And this might have been beginning a new chapter. Could have been regarding his marriage. Okay, so we sort of got confirmation of the last row in the last read with this row. So that's what his participation was so far, okay? Then we have the Queen of Cups, which would be an emotional Miss Monroe, right underneath the Emperor. Remember, he was the president. She was an actress, an emotional one. Front and center of the core 9, we have 10 cups, 10 coins. Oh my gosh. So it reached this. Some of these cards are the same. Or if they're not exactly the same, they're referencing the same thing. But, oversaturation. For him, he was able to stop it. For her, it was fever pitch. Now that's coins, it's not fire, but perhaps she thought that was in her best interest. Okay, we have the Pope. Who could the Pope be? Joe Dimagio? I don't know. She was married. Remember, tarot cards can mean more than one thing at the same time. This could be the lover card can be in reference to the president's marriage, right? But it can also be in reference to hers. Her recent marriage was with Joe Dimagio, who she had been really good friends with, right? She remained friends. I mean, he might have, I don't think he was good for her either in the sense that I think he had some issues. Physical, I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but there seems to be evidence that he was, the reason she left him was because he battered her around a little bit, and maybe he got therapy, maybe he got help, maybe he got counseling. Maybe he came to her, I don't know, maybe. This is interesting. Okay, let's see what's next. Justice. Didn't that fall into place the other day with the other read, making a decision being made? I think this is inverted. Don't mind me. I just don't read inverted cards. Not that for me, it wouldn't change the meaning. I just don't like looking at upside down cards. So we have not a straight, but we have a flush here of coins, of well-being. And the final card out of the core 9 is the beginning of emotion. Wow, so we have 2 aces. He was beginning something different, new direction, maybe with his spouse. And for her, maybe the beginning was something different. I want to pull the quint cards and see what insights that they can give to the rest of this. So isn't this interesting? The final card here is the Tower card. So there's no death here, so I don't think maybe that death was an intended thing. But there could have been overindulgence. She might have just been, there's not too many cards of over emotion here. We only have the Ace of Cups, but it could have been a surge of emotion. It could have been a surge of emotion that became like self-loathing or self-punishment. I know she drank champagne to excess, She was addicted to, I think it's fair to say she was an alcoholic. Champagne was her drink of choice. It was pretty, it was pink, it was fun, it was bubbly, and it did the trick. you know, so I think there is that. You know, I don't think she was in a position to tame her lustful nature, you know, regarding that relationship. And even if she was able to end that relationship with the then president, maybe it bothered her that it wasn't on her terms, you know. Maybe it really bothered her the way he did it. And it, you know, maybe she tried to reach out to Joe Dimagio. That's possible. She might have tried to reach out to him. I don't remember. But that evening was one of despair, self-loathing, and punishment. Okay, I guess it could be said she made a decision. But I don't think she made a decision to hurt herself. I think she just made a decision. Maybe she just said, you know, maybe by the time she checked out, her feeling was, who needs him? I can start over. I got Joe, because this falls under him. But then there is an element of like self-punishment. You know what it's like? The way I'm seeing it or feeling it is, some of you may have noticed that in some of my previous videos, I'm a lot less fat. And I had decided that I really had to lose weight for my health, and I still do. And I lost like 75 pounds or 77 pounds. And then I got struck by COVID. Then I had, immediately, I still had COVID and I had a hip replaced. And I was, you know, flat on my back for like 6 weeks or 7 weeks, something like the crazy amount of time. And I just stopped my exercise and I started punishing myself. And then it was like I spiraled out of control and I got fat again, you know. And the idea of starting over all over again is just overwhelming. And so maybe there was a little bit of that in her, you know, that there was a little bit of the self-loathing, you know, like he rejected me. He dumped me publicly, you know. She kind of probably felt that, you know. I mean, everybody was, you know, I don't know. I mean, it was like a secret, but it wasn't a secret. And that's what I think it was an accident. I don't think she deliberately hurt herself. And I don't think he did anything to hurt her, except emotionally damaged her. Because people, I guess, don't understand how they're, you know, they use people and they discard them. And if you have an emotional person, it really puts them into a tizzy, you know. I think in her case, it, you know, she became maybe self-critical. This could also be self-criticism, you know, and she drank a little extra that night, you know. It's so sad. But it did lead to her demise. And I think there was some self-loathing and self-punishment here. Oh boy, poor soul. I think we should have one more read, don't you? I hate to leave it like this. I'd like to leave it with the Matronua having a cheery read. So let me think of something else and we will do another read. So, of course, you know, it occurs to me that I should have, you know, I should be respectful and just let the poor woman rest in peace. But I kind of just wanted to do a reading on her since I never have, just to see, you know, what might, you know, just have some insights into what we consider might have happened to her. And I just thought, you know, now I'd ask the universe what message, if any, she might be reincarnated now and unavailable to respond to this, but the universe knows. So the essence, I asked the universe the essence of Miss Monroe, if the universe could speak on her behalf, or if she's in a position to speak on her own behalf. Excuse me. What is the message that she would like for us to remember about her, or what is the essence of her that she would like the universe to let us know? Like, what is the essence of her that she would like us to know? I would like to remember. Oops. Do one more. This is a little bit of an awkward deck to shuffle, but it does shuffle well. It's a beautiful card stack. You just have to do it in sections. Okay. Burst of energy. Love of life. Remember her as fun and happy and approachable and beautiful, which she was in her best moments. Ooh. Well, maybe, maybe she wants us to remember her death in a way that maybe will make sense. Temperance, right? Temperance would be the quint card for these two. So it might be a suggestion of, temper your lifestyle. Have fun, but temper your lifestyle to avoid being your own death, right? Being the cause of your own death. So we have 6 of Cups, which is a beautiful number. Fun, again. Now they are at odds because we have fire and water here. So there's some conflict, but let's see what the next card in the core 9 might be. 3 Cups. So this, in and of themselves, it's kind of like enjoy life, have connections with people, be celebratory. What falls under the Death card? Beware the Emperor. Beware the Emperor, who falls under the Death card. So beware perhaps of surrendering. Maybe she's speaking to women, or it could be to men too. But beware of surrendering to someone else, right? Who has, power or is able to overpower you. I mean, the president at that time wasn't the only man who had power over her. I mean, the baseball player, used force on her as well. Different type. And then we have her again. Her moodiness or her emotional side. This is a message for us. So let's see what the rest of this row is. The World card. And 5 Cups. So we have a few cup cards here. There's only 4. There's 4. But of a 9 card spread, 4, it's a lot. We have 2 courts, I think that represent her. And then we have 3 cards of the Triumph Order. So let's do the quint cards and see how they help us wrap this all up. And look at the final outcome card we have here. We have the beautiful Star card, and I think this is one of the prettiest Star cards I've ever seen. I love this card. And it's the final, I don't want to call it the final outcome card, but it's the final quint card, which she was a star. She was bigger than life. She's 60 years later and we still know who she is. I think most of us know who she is. We remember who she is. And maybe she wants us to remember her. She's proud of her legacy, perhaps. So that could be part of it. But it could also be, just to delight in your own life. And we see the Death card here is in play twice. I use the Metranoia Marseille for the second Death card and also for the second Emperor card because they were already in play. And it's another deck that's very lovely. And so I think, and they're compatible in the sense that they're both really pretty. They're nicely done. So I think my only regret is that I don't have a larger size. I really do wish I had gotten in on this when I was able to get a larger size, but that's life. Well, at any rate, it has nothing to do with the read. So, I think there's a message here to don't let your love and be happy and have fun, but don't let yourself be overpowered by someone else. Don't let somebody else's don't be in love on somebody else's terms, and not that you want them to be in love on your terms, but it's a two-way street, right? I mean, be an equal partnership, be on equal terms with your love. Like, don't allow anybody, even if it's a parent who dictates, who you should love, even that kind of thing. Or, if you're in a relationship with people, or, did she have a pattern of picking the same kind of wrong guy? Right? I mean, she was missing a father figure. I mean, her birth father never really acknowledged her. And the legal man that her mother was married to when she gave birth to Marilyn, it had nothing to do with her, So she was missing structure you know? And so maybe she sought structure. I'm not a psychoanalyst, but, it just kind of seems, if the shoe fits, maybe. So, maybe we shouldn't give up that kind of power to somebody else, And here we have the beautiful Temperance card. I have a few favorite Temperance cards, and this is definitely one of them, because I just love the magic here, So everything in moderation, love, alcohol. She did seem to like her alcohol. She loved her champagne, right? So, if this is a message that she would like us to know, I think I've kind of nailed it, or to remember about her. She enjoyed her fame. She achieved quite a lot. I don't think she regrets that she's known for being famous, and, I think she is pleased about that. She achieved quite a lot. I think she feels like she achieved quite a lot, right? But then she was a vulnerable woman, right? She was vulnerable. So there was emotional upset, perhaps, because she chose the wrong men in her life, because maybe that was her baggage, that was her emotional baggage. And maybe her message to us is not to let that happen to us, but to remember her. Maybe does she want us to remember her death? The death card appears twice. Maybe there's something about her death that, doesn't sit well with her. I don't know. I mean, I would think that she'd like to rest in peace and not to have us, call to mind her death. But her death is part of her legacy, I suppose. Anyway, I probably won't do any more readings on Marilyn unless there's a compelling reason to do so. But it seems to me she just wants us to remember her life and what she achieved. And, if there's a message about love, it's just not to let anybody else dominate who you love, or to get a grip on that yourself. And all good things must, be temper, temper the features of your life. Have a radar, have a internal compass for understanding when you don't want to go past the point of no return, right? You want to temper behaviors and relationships to stay on an even keel and to keep things light and happy. Anyway, that's my thought. I hope you enjoyed this reading. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. I don't really ask those things very often, but I would appreciate it if you did those things for me. And until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be brave, and be kind.